Hello friends, I'm back to talk with you about another section in Wayne Mueller's book on Sabbath. This is the one in which he talks about time. And one of his chapters I think sums up really well the challenge that he offers us when we think about taking Sabbath time. And that's when he says, when time is not money. He challenges us to consider the culture in which we live, which measures everything to have value by how much money it produces. He talks about how we measure the wealth of a nation by its gross domestic product, by how much it produces. But he reminds us that there's so many things that are deeply valuable to us and deeply valuable to the goodness of our lives that cannot be counted by dollars. They can only be counted by time. He talks about the time it takes to raise children, the time it takes to take care of people who are sick, the time it takes to spend time in nature and be renewed by the beauty of things, and how in a culture that only measures worth by dollar signs, these things get diminished. And yet we know that our families and our neighborhoods and our communities would not be lively and beautiful places to live if we did not value the things that only grow in the soil of time. So as you are thinking about how to practice Sabbath, it might be helpful to ask the question, where in your life have you traded some of your precious time for money? And how has that cost you in other ways? It's a very challenging conundrum because we also live in a culture that squeezes us financially. And some of the most vulnerable people in our communities do not have the luxury of trading their time, of not trading their time for money. They are desperate to have a place to live and have shelter. They deeply need to put food on their table. And often that means working 2 or 3 jobs. And that challenges the culture in which we live and the economy that we value, which says that it's important more for people to give up precious time with their families because that's the only way they can have their most basic needs met. When we live in a culture that values time over money, then those kinds of choices are the most dangerous and challenging for us. So the challenge in this particular section isn't just to ask the question about where do we trade time for money, but how do we begin to challenge a culture that will only reward people for their time and won't allow them to have really what can almost seem like a luxury of time with the people that they love.